Welcome to Mindshift. I'm Brandon. Today is episode 36 of my secular Bible study series in which we are looking at Zephaniah. What a crazy little book. It's almost like all these minor prophets were trying to see who can make the worst case for their God in the shortest amount of chapters. And yes, I'm being a little facetious to start us off, but there is so much unique horror in this book that maybe it put me in some kind of mood. The thing that I think is unique about this book right off the bat is that it is almost God speaking for himself entirely. This isn't like some of the other prophets who say, hey, justice has to be served and God is going to use Babylon or the Assyrians. This is just, I, God, don't like this, or this, and I'm going to do all of these things because of it. God wants full credit here. You will be amazed by some of these verses. And so that's how we're going to tackle this book. We're not going to do the typical 7 points. We probably won't return to that until we get to the New Testament, as there's just so much redundancy with these minor prophets. We've heard it all before, but let me set the stage for where we're at. This is the 7th century BCE. We know that because we know who the king is. That is mentioned here right at the beginning. It is in the time of King Josiah, who was otherwise considered a pretty decent king of the southern kingdom, trying to reform the people, get rid of the idol worship, and get back on track until his untimely death, which is described in both, I'm not sure if it's 1st or 2nd, but Chronicles and the Book of Kings. Totally unnecessary, as he picks a fight with a pharaoh of Egypt who is going after the Assyrians and even says, I'm not going to mess with you. But then Josiah still presses on and gets taken down by archers, I think. So kind of a unique, fun story there. But it is in this time, which also means who are the other prophets here? I'd like to put together a chart for you guys so you can visualize everything that we have gone through. Other 7th century prophets would be like Jeremiah and also Uriah, who is mentioned in Jeremiah, and Habakkuk and Nahum are the closest other prophets going on. Again, this is in the southern kingdom, so we're talking about Judah here and Jerusalem. And of course, the looming threat, as always, for the southern kingdom is the Babylonians. So that's kind of setting our stage. Who is Zephaniah? Well, we actually get a family history right at the beginning, the son of so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so, up to a name of Hezekiah. Now, there's no way to tell if it's the Hezekiah who was a king, but maybe that means that Zephaniah is 4th generation royalty. Either way, he has quite the depiction of this God. And again, it's 3 chapters, and they're broken down into chapter 1 is the coming judgment on Judah. Chapter 2 is the judgment on Judah's enemies. And then chapter 3 is judgment on Jerusalem and the nations at large. And just listen to how crazy it's going to start off here for us. Verse 1 is just where we get some of that back history. It is the word of the Lord that came to Zephaniah, the son of so-and-so and so-and-so. And it starts right away. So the rest is just the Lord speaking, essentially. I will utterly sweep away everything from the face of the earth, declares the Lord. I will sweep away man and beast. I will sweep away the birds of the heavens and the fish of the sea and the rubble with the wicked. I will cut off mankind from the face of the earth, declares the Lord. After that, he's going to get specific and start talking about Judah, but that's how it starts. And there's no indication here that he doesn't mean the entire world. Because normally it is so hyper-specific. This nation, this kingdom, this king, these prophets, these people are in the way. But now it's the whole earth. And it's said multiple times. So you can talk about this being hyperbole, but it really almost seems like the biblical writers had this so ingrained in their head that the only thing that mattered, that the whole world that was revolving around them were these few kingdoms and these few enemies. And I think that it pretty clearly points to, again, some of the small-mindedness and clear man-made nature of this book, as opposed to a God that actually created everything. And you always have to love when he threatens to sweep away all the birds of the heavens and all the fish of the sea, because they definitely had anything to do with what he's upset about. This is a God who cannot control his temper. So it goes on from there, and we hear about the idol worship and how mad he is against Judah. And then we get down to verse 7, and this is where we get a whole series of lines that talk about the day of the Lord. Now, I have heard this term a million times. It is littered throughout the prophetic books. And the day of the Lord is really the day of the Lord's divine justice or wrath or reckoning or punishment, or however positive or negative of a word that you want to put there. But wouldn't it be crazy if the day of the Lord was the day where everyone got along? Wouldn't it be crazy if the day of the Lord is when Satan's deceptions were lifted from this earth and he was fully banished, and what happened was man's ability to know about this God and follow this God for themselves because of his obvious splendor, glory, righteousness, and perfection? Like, there's a billion things that if you were going to define the day of the Lord, you can think of how to do it so much better than the day of impending doom and wrath, which is what is described as we go through this. And here is how God once again talks about his very special day. Be silent before the Lord God, for the day of the Lord is near. The Lord has prepared a sacrifice and consecrated his guests. And he goes on from there to describe the destruction, everything that's going to happen. And then there's a special little verse coming up between 12 and 13. Those who are complacent, those who say in their hearts, the Lord will not do good, nor will he do ill. Their goods shall be plundered, and their houses laid waste. Though they build houses, they shall not inhabit them. Though they plant vineyards, they shall not drink wine from them. So again, we know, even from a New Testament perspective, this God hates apathy. The lukewarm will be spit from Jesus' mouth. And here we see something as well. Those who say in their hearts, the Lord will do no good and will do no ill. You mean the people that have observed that nothing actually happens because of this God. God says, oh, I'll correct that by doing so much good. Nope, by doing so much harm. I'll have their houses plundered and everything laid waste. You got them, God. You sure showed them. He goes on in 14 and 15 to remind us of something interesting. The great day of the Lord is near and hastening fast. The sound of the day of the Lord is bitter, and the mighty man cries aloud there. See, again, many apologists would try to argue that, no, this day of the Lord is perfect justice. We are finally coming to a place where real joy will be able to exist because we will have to, maybe a negative word, but purge the evil from the land. And God just wants to make sure that we know the sound of that day is not glorious. It's not trumpets. It's not hallelujahs. It's a bitter sound. It's a sound of wailing and terror and loss. In 15, he says, a day of wrath is that day, a day of distress and anguish, a day of ruin and devastation, a day of darkness and gloom, a day of clouds and thick darkness. Not what I would have pictured when I think about the day of the Lord originally, until you read his words. 17 says, I will bring distress on mankind so that they shall walk like the blind, because they have sinned against the Lord. Their blood shall be poured out like dust. In the fire of his jealousy, all the earth shall be consumed. For a full and sudden end he will make of all the inhabitants of the earth. Again, when you get so specific with your word choice like this, it's hard to imagine the excuses of hyperbole being correct. For the fourth time now, in just chapter 1, God is talking about his fiery jealousy that will consume the earth, the entire earth, for a full and sudden end, so that all the inhabitants of the earth shall be this way. Like, come on. A, this didn't happen, except back in Genesis. And even then, of course, it didn't really happen. And B, how would this be justice? But we've talked about that so much. So let's move into chapter 2, which, if you can believe it, is going to be worse, because now God is not dealing as nicely as he does with his chosen people group. And this is the judgment against all of Judah's enemies. It seems like God is Judah's biggest enemy. No, I'm not going to read to you as much. He's describing all of the bad guys, but there are a few things I want to point out to you. In verse 5, he says this, the word of the Lord is against you, O Canaan, land of the Philistines, and I will destroy you until no inhabitant is left. In verse 7, he says, the seacoast shall become the possessions of the remnant of the house of Judah, on which they shall graze, and in the house of Ashkelon they shall lie down at evening, for the Lord their God will be mindful of them and restore their fortunes. So once again, just pointing out that the only group he really cares to let prosper after this total destruction is, again, his chosen people group, and that they will inhabit the land that is not theirs, that they stole from the Canaanites in the first place, once again to be their resting place where God is mindful of them. Tell me again how this beautiful religion of peace, love, and joy is manifesting itself in the word and in the world. I have heard the taunts of Moab and the revilings of the Ammonites, how they have taunted my people and made boast against their territory. Therefore, as I live, declares the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, Moab shall become like Sodom, and the Ammonites like Gomorrah. Except that's not what happened to those two cities. Yes, there were conquerings, mainly by the Babylonians, and then some future civilizations and cultures that aren't quite recognized in the Bible because they happened after the wonderful prophetic writings of the Bible. And some of these groups, yes, did get conquered to the point of assimilating into other groups, and some kind of morphed naturally and organically as cultures meshed together through trade. That's what happened. Do you remember what happened to Sodom and Gomorrah? They were just utterly destroyed in a single day. False. Let's skip down to 10. This shall be their lot in return for their pride, because they taunted and boasted against the people of the Lord of hosts. The Lord will be awesome against them, for he will famish all the gods of the earth, and to him shall bow down, each in its place, all the lands of the nations. Just a really jealous, petty God that can't make up his mind if he's the only God or just the most powerful God, that is driven to destruction that he delights in via boasts and taunts. So let's move on to chapter 3. The judgment on Jerusalem and the nations, which I thought that's what we had pretty much just heard, but we start with, woe to her who is rebellious and defiled, the oppressing city. She listens to no voice, she accepts no correction, she does not trust in the Lord, she does not draw near to the Lord. I wonder why. This is like the abuser who just got done verbally and physically abusing his victim to no end, and is like, when is she going to learn? Why doesn't she care? Why doesn't she seek after me? How stupid. And it's going to get worse in this theme. Let's go to verse 6. I have cut off nations, their battlements are in ruins. I have laid waste their streets so that no one walks in them. Their cities have been made desolate, without a man, without an inhabitant. I said, surely you will fear me. You will accept correction. Yep, that's the way to do it. Good job. Good Father. Right? I just wish that I could take as real to life as possible a clip of the destruction, chaos, terror, heartbreak, and suffering that would have just happened to these people. And then you have God looming over them saying, yeah, now you'll fear me. Here's your correction. Now you'll learn. And then cut to the Christians in mass on Sunday, singing with their eyes closed and tears rolling down their cheeks and arms outstretched, while the emotional chords play and they cry out, good Father. It's what you are. It's what you are. In what world are Christians worshiping this God? I have no idea. There's two main sections left here within the final chapter. We have this one, which is the conversion of the nations, which is just hilarious. In many of these books, we get this utopia, this picture of perfection when everyone comes together and sings Kumbaya and has figured out that this God is the God. But more importantly than the incorrect utopian vision, I want to point out the doings with which this God uses. In verse 9, for at that time I will change the speech of the people to a pure speech, and all of them may call upon the name of the Lord and serve him with one accord. Why not do that now? Why not do that back then? Why was that not always the plan? What is he doing that is interfering with our free will, either then or now, depending on what you think is the original design, that he could have had it this way and we otherwise had it that way? I simply do not understand this. In verse 11, he goes on to say, on that day you shall not be put to shame because of the deeds by which you have rebelled against me. For then I will remove from your midst your proudly exalted ones, and you shall no longer be haughty in my holy mountain. Again, he's identifying the distinction between collective punishment and him just removing the bad apples to save the bushel. Why was that not always the plan? Why is he waiting for this specific day? Right? What we see here is a God who can do better, who understands the benefit to the people when he does better, and who has otherwise chosen not to. It's inexcusable. And we continue with verse 12. But I will leave in your midst a people humble and lowly. This is that remnant that he's always talking about. The people that have made it through all of the destruction, that have finally taken their heed, been corrected by his anger and wrath, and have poured their hearts out to him. This is the chosen of the chosen left over, and with them he will make this utopia. And it goes like this: they shall do no injustice and speak no lies, nor shall there be found in their mouth a deceitful tongue, for they shall graze and lie down, and none shall make them afraid. This is almost verbatim what we see in, oh man, I would be guessing which minor prophet book we covered. It was like 4 or 5 of them ago, where you lie down and you are no longer afraid, and there is no more war. You don't even know how. And it's false. And even if it were true, it would only be for his chosen people, and only the elite from among them that were the most devout, that stuck with him during his tirades and destruction. The best victims is what he is saying. And again, only from his chosen people group. Now we get Israel's joy and restoration amongst some of the other nations. And he says this: sing aloud, O daughters of Zion, shout, O Israel, rejoice and exult with all your heart, O daughter of Jerusalem. The Lord has taken away the judgments against you. He has cleared away your enemies. The King of Israel, the Lord, is in your midst. You shall never again fear evil. On that day it shall be said to Jerusalem, fear not, O Zion. Let your hands grow weak. The Lord your God is in your midst, a mighty one who will save. It goes on like this, as God describing himself as a poet who commands worship and says, and I will worship and say beautiful things over you as well. And they all held hands and everything was fine. And that's how the book ends. And you can take this in many different ways. You can take it in, well, that is something that they actually expected to happen shortly after they get back from captivity in Babylon, or that's something that would happen maybe when Jesus or the coming Messiah happens. That's something that will happen in the far future when God times it, or maybe they've been pointing towards the apocalypse and the 1,000-year reign on earth. All of these different interpretations about how to make these insane ideas actually work and come together. But what seems most clear is that when Zephaniah or any of these other prophets are making these kinds of bold declarations and claims, it is again just this revenge fantasy of they're going to get theirs and our God is going to make sure of it. And when he's done with that, and yes, even if he has to punish us, those of us who are left over will inherit actual peace. And that just 100% didn't happen, as I've already pointed out. This people group is currently at war 2,700 years later. They are not lying down in peace right now. They have not traded in their swords for plowshares. False promises from false prophets of a false God. The end. So thank you so much for watching. I hope you learned something. Let me know your thoughts on this book. I will see you absolutely on Sunday morning at 9 a.m. Central Time with a new video. Until then, keep thinking. I wanted to personally thank my top tiers of support: my Iconoclast and GVI, Jacob, Joe, Martin, Oliver, Perry, Rokkit, and Shawn, my Humanist heroes, Jarrod and Kristi, my Atheist advocates, Caleb, Jeffrey, Karen, Sparky, and Todd, as well as all of my secular scholar patrons. If you believe in the mission of this channel or you just enjoy the content, please consider joining these fine people. Thanks and have a great day.